September 16th, 1223. The banks of the Kalka River ran dark with blood. 14,000 Rus warriors dead, their bones stripped clean by crows before sundown. But what the chronicles never told you, what they erased in favor of a cleaner legend, was that the slaughter began with a midnight betrayal, fueled by a forbidden liaison between a Rus's envoy's wife and a Mongol commander who signed the peace treaty with blood still on his lips. Before we continue, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I read every one. The woman, Elena of Halish, was just 19. The commander Subutai, already a living legend at 30 when they met under Treaty Parley, her veil soaked from tears, his hands still sticky with blood from the Naiman massacre. They met beneath the broken rafters of a monastery burned days before, whispers louder than vows. 3 nights, 11 kisses, 1 ill-fated promise. When she slipped him the falcon feather scroll drawn in invisible ink revealing Russ's force positions, she thought she was sparing her people. Instead, she signed their death sentence. Subutai smiled, kissed her neck, then rode out at dawn, his composite bow strung, his scouts already moving to encircle. No war horn sounded, just the soft hiss of arrows loosed under moonlight, slicing through sleeping men. Lie met lie, blood met silk. War began not at dawn but in her bed. By sunrise, entire battalions were already in flight, their commanders dead or delirious with terror. The Mongol horse archers moved like shadows across the steppe, splitting into 3 perfectly timed flanks, a trick they called the two-man spiral. 10,000 riders, each armed with a laminated horn and sinew composite bow that could punch through iron at 300 paces, cut through the Rus formations with mathematical precision. Bodies folded before the arrowhead formations reached blade range, and still, no drums, no banners, only the whistle of death moving faster than sound. Behind the massacre, sealed in a birch bark box tied to Subutai's saddle, were Elena's letters, one too many, one too jealous, documenting not just their tryst, but another affair she suspected between her husband and a Mongol interpreter named Temulan, age 16, a spy since 13, and poisoner by 14. Secrets were blood, passion was strategy, and every moan she wrote of became another village erased from the map. What the Russes thought was, Mongol cruelty was lust weaponized, and by that week's end, 16 settlements were burned, 5 commanders decapitated, and Elena's name stricken from Halich's records not as a traitor, but as if she never existed. But the truth behind the Kalka carnage did not end with Elena's disappearance. Days before the final ambush at the river's edge, a secret council of boyars had convened in the catacombs beneath Kiev's Dormition Cathedral. Save and men. 2 nobles with debts to Mongol gold merchants, one who fathered a bastard with a Cuman hostage, and a priest, Father Mikhail, who traded absolution for coin and carnal favors long before the Mongols reached the border. They conspired to delay reinforcements, sabotaging the message runner's path with false trails and broken relays. Why? Because revenge has appetite, and power is sweeter when bought with another man's blood. When the battle erupted, and Subutai's forces executed a pincer from both hill and riverbank, none of the conspirators were present. They watched from towers, wine in hand, corpses below. What history recorded as a military failure was a carefully planted rot where ambition, betrayal, and whispered affairs carved more deeply than any blade. By the time Prince Mstislav fell, his face unrecognizable, body pierced with 12 arrows, the traitors had already divvied up his lands on parchment, still wet with ink. North of the battlefield, as smoke still curled like serpents into the blood-orange sky, Gyuk, the 16-year-old son of Ugadai, watched with unsmiling eyes. He had not yet killed, but his fingers twitched for the string of his bow. On his orders, a caravan of chained prisoners, 60 in number, including monks, a concubine, and 1 9-year-old scribe, was dragged to Subutai's camp. The concubine, Mira, had once belonged to a Rus's general and bore a tattooed map across her thigh, a mapping of hidden fords and abandoned forts. She'd inked it herself, with pigment ground from berries and bone. She offered the secret crossing for a single request: the severed head of her former master, who had carved the same paths into her flesh with a branding iron. 3 hours later, his skull was in her lap, and the Mongols crossed the Dniester, unopposed. That bridge of betrayal led not just to another victory, But to another love for Gyuk returned to the girl's tent 5 times that season, each night a different name. Each morning more bodies hung from the elm trees. What the chronicles would call strategy was stitched instead from vengeance, lust, and an empire addicted to secrets. The Mongols did not just conquer with bowstrings and hooves, they conquered with every whispered lie, every stolen kiss, every woman turned weapon. The world bled, and the steppes drank greedily. Westward, whispers reached the Carpathians before hooves did. Word carried in wine-soaked tongues spoke of a ghost army that rode without sleep, struck without mercy, and vanished without trace. Weeks later, at the Battle of Mohi, Hungary would bleed beneath those same phantom riders. But even before the charge, treachery brewed behind royal walls. Queen Gertrude's letters hidden beneath altar stone and silk vestments spoke of her affair with a Cuman warlord turned Mongol consort. 10 years it lasted. 2 bastard children, dozens of forged seals, and 1 poisoned goblet intended not for her husband, King Andrew II, but for a rival count who had threatened exposure. The poison derived from aconite and wolf liver was traced only after the count's steward died gasping in his sleep. Yet the scandal was smothered beneath the chaos of war. When Batu Khan's men descended on Mohi, flanking through the marshes in a maneuver learned from Cuman lovers turned informants, it was not brute force but pillow talk that split Hungarian lines. Amid the carnage, 40,000 fell. By nightfall, Queen Gertrude had vanished, her chambers ransacked, her carriage found overturned near the Tizer's edge, her children missing, her scent still clinging to the foreign saddle left behind. History recorded her as dead. But one Tatar scout's journal, found decades later hidden in a scroll tube, described her hand pale, ringless, placed with reverence on Batu's knee. Some empires fall by steel, others are seduced into silence. The Mongols mastered both. South of the Danube, panic birthed prophecy. In Tarnovo, Bulgaria's sacred hilltop capital, the monks whispered of a demon legion that devoured time itself. But what history scorned as superstition was merely forewarning masked in prayer. For when the Mongols reached Bulgaria in 1242, they found no armies, only bribes, diplomacy and betrayal sold in silk. Ivan Asen, the boyar of Vidin, 22 and reckless with charm, had offered peace in person. But the feast that sealed this oath was laced with something ancient. Belladonna crushed into crushed grape, served to a rival noble whose lands barred Mongol passage. 3 hours later, his eyes burst blood, and by sunrise the steppe riders passed through gates opened by Ivan's own men. For his loyalty, he was gifted not gold but Kuchin, a Mongol noblewoman masked as a trade envoy, veiled in sable and secrets. She spoke 5 tongues, bled none. Their affair burned behind tapestries while their victims burned in the fields. For each night they spent between tangled sheets, 3 villages vanished. One scribe counted 31 ruined monasteries in 40 days, and even the altar boys knew which oaths were louder, those made in war, or those moaned in velvet silence. The chronicles say Bulgaria survived the Mongol storm, but only because one lover fed death to the other's enemies, one dish at a time. The palace walls still echo with screams and whispers of forbidden love. East of Krakow, winter came bloodthirsty. Snow fell in sheets, muffling footsteps and swallowing bodies whole. The Mongol vanguard under Baidar, youngest grandson of Genghis, arrived by moonlight with just 1,400 men, yet by dawn, 5 to 1,000 Polish defenders lay dead or dying. But it was not brute force that broke them. It was betrayal served from within the church. Bishop Arnaud of Sandomierz, age 52, canonized for piety, compromised for coin. He had sold maps of city defenses in exchange for a ruby-studded crucifix and the promise of silk-robed absolution for an affair he could never confess his cousin's daughter, Sophia, 12 years entangled in sin. Her name was never inked in parish records, but her letters bound in lambskin and steeped in frankincense spoke of nights in the monastery cellar, cloaked in incense and guilt. When Krakow burned, the skeletons in velvet did too. Only 3 survived that siege. Baidar, the bishop, and Sophia, pregnant, nameless, smuggled east beneath a corpse cart. What chronicles buried under sanctified lies was this: Poland's gates did not fall to arrows. They fell to bedclothes, bloodlines, and bought forgiveness. The altar wept, the son was born Mongol, and the cathedral bells rang hollow for decades. The steps moved on, but the ashes whispered one final blasphemy: not all empires die. Some simply dissolve between thighs and thuribles. But not all victories are won on open fields or behind drawn curtains. In the shadowed passes of the Julian Alps, 1243, a final reckoning brewed where blade met bloodline and loyalty was drowned in lust. The Mongols had reached the Jagojay Valley by torchlight, led there by a defector named Casimir, once captain of the Slovenian border guard, now stripped of allegiance for the price of flesh and vengeance. His sister, Milena, had married a Venetian merchant who sold her into concubinage to settle a debt. Casimir traced her chains to a Mongol war camp and switched sides that same hour. In exchange for her release, he drew a map in blood, 3 red lines curving through the pass, where the cliffs could funnel an entire army into a meat grinder. Subutai took the bait, sent a vanguard of 6,000 to their deaths, and Casimir's body was hung beside theirs, strangled not by rope, but by Milena's own girdle. 2 days later, 5 Mongol assassins infiltrated the Venetian quarter of Ljubljana, using priest robes sewn with coins. Inside the Doge's embassy, they slit the throats of 4 guards and poisoned the ambassador's wine with powdered monkshood. The envoy survived briefly, but his mistress, a Croatian courtesan named Lidija, confessed under torture to being the real agent, seducing 2 scribes and blackmailing a bishop to rewrite border treaties. She died naked, burned alive before a silent crowd dotted with foreign spies. That was the Mongol gift: seduction as siegecraft, betrayal as doctrine. They conquered lands, but more than that, they conquered faith, family, love. And after the boughs fell silent, all that remained was a broken map, a name scratched into stone, and the sound of hooves retreating into history's most intimate nightmares. In the scorched valleys of the Caucasus, where wind carried secrets louder than screams, the Mongols launched their quietest conquest. February 1244, Tbilisi. Smoke curled from the palace hearth while King David VII, barely 20 and blood-soaked from recent rebellions, prepared a desperate counterstrike. But it was not his soldiers who failed him first. It was his elder concubine, Tamar, a half-Byzantine diplomat's daughter with a black opal ring and a tongue sharper than any dagger. For 6 weeks, she'd bedded 3 Mongol envoys in the guise of negotiations, threading seduction into statecraft, soaking each pillar with whispered positions of Georgian supply caches and fortress weak points. One envoy, Chuluun, had written her 14 love poems by the time he led the sappers beneath the citadel walls. Night they breached, fire they lit, blood they harvested. The city cracked before dawn, 18,000 killed, children flung into the Kura. Tamar vanished in a red veil streaked with soot, last seen riding east with a saddlebag of letters and a dagger traced in dragonbone. David VII survived, broken and disfigured, and swore he'd seen her reflection in the blade that killed his brother. No chronicle dares mention her, but in Mongol archives buried beneath Karakoram, one scroll survives with her name carved 9 times between battle tallies. Love, they said, builds empires, but Tamar proved one truth darker: lust ends them faster. West of the Adriatic, the city of Ragusa, modern-day Dubrovnik, glittered like a jewel scraped raw. There, in late 1244, the Mongols made no formal invasion. Instead, they sent one woman, Altani, 34, born of a Tangut slave, princess and a Khitan warlord, schooled in 12 dialects, trained to kill with perfume. Her mark, Marco de Castino, the city's mercantile magistrate and gatekeeper of Venetian trade routes. For 40 nights they met in a converted chapel beneath the eastern harbor wall amid incense, unpaid guards, and drowning guilt. She offered confession with fingers, catechism with flesh. On the 41st night, she delivered not a kiss, but a map sewn beneath her shift, detailing fortifications of Dalmatian ports, cargo inventories, and merchant travel cycles. He signed every copy bare-chested, blindfolded, whispering prayers to a god already deaf. 2 weeks after her final embrace, 5 Mongol fire junks slipped past Ragusan patrols disguised as spice caravels. The docks erupted in flame, traders beheaded on ledger tables. In the chaos, Marco vanished, only to be found days later in a cistern, his body nailed shut in a barrel of stolen saffron, his hands tied with Altani's rosary, his final ledger missing one page, the page with her real name. No siege, no army, just a woman, a whisper, and a city undone by desire sold for strategy. Empires are not only conquered with steel and siege towers, some fall in locked rooms, to lovers who never meant to stay. In the highlands of Armenia, beneath the crag-toothed shadows of Lake Sevan, the final whisper of Mongol conquest came not with a cavalry charge but with a wedding. Autumn 1245. Prince Levon II of Cilicia, eager to stall invasion, offered his youngest sister Shushanik in marriage to Togun, the eldest son of Ogedai. She was 17, veiled in scarlet, with eyes that had watched 6 cousins fall to Mongol blades in the last year alone. She swore before priests, but her heart swore elsewhere to sister Mariam, her handmaid and lover since they were 13. The wedding was spectacle. The betrayal was swift. On the 7th night, Togun drank wine laced with crushed scorpions and cactus resin poison, known only in Levantine brothels. He survived, barely, cursing in 5 tongues, and retreating with a force of 9,000 toward Erzurum in vengeance. But the message was received. Armenia would bleed. The Mongols returned in spring, torching Ani, scattering monks across the cliffs, and hanging 20 nobles dressed as brides. Shushanik's fate? Unknown. But a letter surfaced 2 decades later in a Karakorum archive, written in Armenian script, signed simply M, describing a woman with fire-colored hair tending wounded Mongols, her hands wrapped in monk's cloth, her neck marked with twin bite scars. No army returned to those hills. No general claimed the valley ever again. The chronicles fell silent, but the trees still lean east, and the wind carries a name that history dared not translate. Some empires burned. This one bled out in silk and silence. In the shattered ruins of Erzurum, 1246, where black snow mingled with ash and no bird dared nest, the final secrets of the Mongol war machine wrote themselves not on parchment, but in flesh. There, deep in a wine cellar turned torture chamber, Qasar Genghis Khan's brutal cousin, known for skinning prisoners alive, uncovered a scroll sewn within a priest's habit. It bore coordinates inked in crushed garnet, directions to a crusader treasure meant as bribe to delay Mongol advance. The location, Mount Ararat. The offer, a forged relic wrapped in golden thread, purportedly the Holy Lance. The bait snapped. 3 weeks later, a caravan of 12 envoys never returned, found dismembered, eyes gouged, tongues replaced with feathers. Their silence was the Mongols' final message. No lie would outlast them. But from that massacre, one girl survived, a mute Armenian novice, age 15, raped, escaped, and later seen wearing a Mongol officer's boots. Her name erased, her vengeance carved in the back of maps smuggled east. As the empire reached its zenith, it stood atop graves no one dared name, affairs scorched from memory, and betrayals etched forever in blood and silk. War's end. But conquest by desire never dies, it only waits for the next heartbeat to betray. The steps grew quiet. The gossip did not. And so it ended on a threshold between myth and memory. No final trumpet sounded. No treaty etched in marble. Just a whisper passed between survivors. A rumor that conquest had never ridden on horseback but hidden in bedchambers, in poison vials disguised as prayer bottles, in kisses sealed with intelligence maps, rather than affection. The Mongol bow struck far, but the real weapon was seeded in betrayal, raised on lust, and sharpened by the appetite of unremembered women and conspirators cloaked in virtue. The world collapsed in patterns only lovers and liars ever understood. Histories declared the empire the largest in landmass. Statistics rendered the death toll, but none told of the girl drowned to prevent her confession, the bishop buried alongside the mistress he vowed never to name, or the letters burned before they could indict an entire kingdom. They left behind no victory parades, only ashes, whispers, and a single truth. The Mongol Empire was not just built by warriors, it was forged in the bed, the blade, and the betrayal, and some wounds cut deeper than empire itself. Even as the edges of empire frayed, the legacy of the Mongol warpath did not fade, it mutated. In the shadows of Samarkand's ruined madrasas, and beneath the red-tinged arches of Khorasan, rumors spoke of a final ledger. A black silk-bound book passed from courtesan to caravan guard, detailing lovers turned spies, priests turned poisoners, and the names of every man who had traded a kingdom for a kiss. Subutai's last campaign was not a battle, but a purge of those who knew too much, who had loved too loudly, who had bled secrets instead of loyalty. By the time of his quiet death near the Yenisei, 43 women had been listed in that ledger, 3 queens among them. The book vanished. So did the witnesses. But its echoes remained in the torn vestments, scorched palace linens, and the hush that always followed stories begun with how the Mongols came, not with banners, not with cannon, but with caresses laced in conquest. They rode with arrows, but their sharpest weapon was always intimacy turned imperial. The empire faded. The maps changed. But beneath the stones of every conquered city, hearts still beat with fear of perfume, parchment, and the echo of horse hooves, because in truth, the Mongol conquest never ended. It simply folded itself into flesh and waited. And now, in the silence after slaughter, only dust remains, dust that once was the breath of generals, the sighs of spies, the moans of seduced kings, and the final gasps of poisoned queens. Cities turned to graves, lovers into myths, and truth into shadows. What warrior could resist a whispered secret? What empire could endure a kiss laced with treason? The Mongols did not just conquer land, they rewrote desire as doctrine, made betrayal a ritual sacrament, and turned war into the most intimate performance of all. Their legacy is not just blood on blades or kingdoms on maps, but the quiver in a voice before confession, the wet ink of a love letter that never arrived, and the soft rustle of silk in a tent moments before an army fell. No monument marks these victories, only a breath still caught in the ruins, a story still buried beneath a palace stone, and the reminder that the sharpest arrows were always those loosed from the heart. War ends when soldiers die, but seduction endures, empire or no. So it ends not with a sword raised high or a treaty signed beneath trembling banners, but with a whisper trapped in the folds of velvet, a kiss exchanged before betrayal, and one final arrow loosed from lips instead of quiver. The Mongol Empire, history's largest drawn in blood and silence, did not collapse so much as it exhaled, disappearing into memory, into myths laced with lingerie and ledger ink, into stories too dangerous for chronicles, but too delicious for silence. Genghis conquered the steppes. Yes, but his heirs conquered the soul. Through every poisoned chalice, every midnight liaison turned massacre, every battlefield carved by silk-slipped secrets, they rewrote how empires rise and fall, not by sword, not by siege, but by desire, dressed in deception, breathing in the dark. And though the banners have faded, the garrisons abandoned, if you listen closely beneath the wind that hisses over forgotten palaces, you'll still hear it, that tremor, that whisper, that last seduction. The Mongols were here, and they never left. So beware the silence behind veils, and the scent that lingers after a diplomat departs. For no fortress, no king, no virtue was ever truly safe once the Mongols chose their mark. They did not scream their conquest. They whispered it through satin sheets, between church walls, beneath blood-soaked maps, inked with confession. This is not a story of warriors only, but of women weaponized, of monks corrupted, of treaties sealed by flesh and undone by shame. Half the world fell, but not to thunder or iron, to secrets, to kisses, to lies sharper than any blade. And as long as history prefers its heroes clean, these truths will stay hidden, waiting in the stillness where memory hesitates, then dares to remember.